This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 10 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. I do this.
I watch your videos, I know. I like it.
Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and I'd like to introduce you to a colleague, now a friend, Kofi Yeboah. He's a DP, he's a camera op, and he's a YouTuber, and he knows his when it comes to video in a way that I simply don't. But the interesting thing, Kofi, is that, what was it? We were having breakfast the other day or lunch or something, and we were just really vibing. And it's just my pleasure to have him on the channel to talk about the new S12 and S12E LUMIX cameras from Panasonic. So, by the way, if you hear other noises, which I'm sure that we will be successful at editing out, that's because we are on the 35th floor of the Fairmont in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
All right, man. So take it from the top. What do you think we're seeing in the S1 Mark II? First, is it what you thought it would be?
It was funny because we had an over-under in a little separate group chat of like what we thought the camera was. And I think there was only two features I think I got wrong that I didn't see that was going to be on the camera. One was the webcam USB utility. That was the one thing I didn't see coming. And I think the other one was multiple open gate modes. In my head, I assumed it was going to be the same 6K, 30 frames a second, 3x2, so it's anamorphic friendly. And then effectively everything would kind of be honestly close to the Z6 III. I thought that would be the smartest thing in terms of where Lumix is kind of picking where they're putting a lot of their sensor technology into and what in terms of being close proximity to it. But outside of that, it was pretty much what I expected it to be. I didn't expect it to be in the same body as the S1R2 though. So that was kind of a nice surprise because the way that they designed that body, especially coming from other cameras that I've used before, kind of mixed together all my favorites. Like with the fully, I don't know what you'd call the screen, but I guess a fully articulating screen, tally lights, record button on the front and back.
Here, yeah.
You have the mode dials that are like, it gives you everything that you would want out of a camera body design. Yeah. And then they put in a really nice sensor in it too.
Yeah, I agree with you. I, on the other hand, thought it would be the exact same body as the S1R2, just from an economics perspective. It didn't surprise me that there was direct USB-C for streaming, but like so many other cameras that do this as well, I wish they had a second USB-C port because then you can't send power to it. Yeah. You can use a battery eliminator, that'll do it, but that's something that I wish folks would do. Let's talk a little bit about Open Gate.
Yep.
Because up until very recently, I have been the Grinch when it comes to Open Gate. And my view is the difference in resolution that you gain by having the full frame available to you for 9x16 is a ludicrous value proposition. And the reason why I always thought that was true is because on the basis of resolution, that was the only way I was thinking about it, no one looking at TikTok is going to pick up any difference in resolution. But what we talked about yesterday, and what I found for the first time shooting Hasselblad's X2D, which is a native 4x5 sensor, is that it provides additional headroom.
Yep.
And that makes it easier to compose for multiple aspect ratios, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think and this is coming from where my walk of life is from, because I work on smaller productions. I'm not a big 20-person crew DP. 6 for me is a party. And a lot of the jobs that I've worked on has been delivery jobs where you go in, you set up, you light, you do your sound or whatever. You maybe have like a crew of 5 or 6 people. You give the footage and then you see them, see you later, and never see you again. Or you see them often, but that's usually the basis of the job. What's helpful, and it's not necessarily asked from clients, but it's always appreciated, is when I give them open gate footage at the highest resolution that they can edit on. Because what ends up happening is we just did a ad with Trish Stratus with WWE. They needed a 16:9 to have footage for the website. They wanted 9:16 to be able to put it on Instagram and vertical content. But then they needed like 1:1 and 4:5 for some other platforms as well. You could theoretically shoot a 16:9 and crop that stuff in, or orient your camera, redo lines, but it's so helpful when you say, hey, you know what? Here's the highest resolution with the most amount of space you can cut it up from, and we only have to do it once, right? That's more time to kind of go from one shot to the other shot, because when you have to shoot for multiple aspect ratios, well, you either have to bring an extra camera or shoot it twice or 3 times, whatever the case is. So you're saving yourself some money, or you're saving yourself getting another camera. So there is, from a client perspective, that is not necessarily always requested, but I've never had a client say, you know what, you gave me too much resolution and too much of the frame. On the S1R2, you can shoot in 8K if you like, but you could also shoot in a really nice 4K too. I'm not going to be mad that it's 8K enabled, but I'll use that 4K all day long, right? So it's kind of the same thing.
As a YouTuber, listen, I would shoot at 4K just because I want to see it. I don't use proxy files. You know, I paid for the gear. I have to look at my face for hours on end. Let me see every blemish. I want to see that. So that's 4K. But I shoot at 4K 8:0 because I'm controlling the light. It's just me. And the first rule of a DP that I learned long ago is you minimize the dynamic range for the scene. So it's the S1 II is a very different value proposition for a YouTuber than it is for a camera operator, a DP for commercial productions.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that, though, is kind of the I/O side of things. It has nothing to do with the image quality. The image quality is more than fine for most things, and it would be a lie for me to sit up here and be like, oh, the S1 II doesn't have the resolution or the color or whatever it is for commercial project professional work. It'd be a lie. The thing actually is going to be in the body. Sometimes you got to run a wireless monitor. If you want a better connection or something that's more stable, most people use SDI. It doesn't have SDIs, unfortunately, right?
But at least it has full-size HDMI.
Yes, thank God that we've done that with cameras, because I remember in 2018, 19, where like it was a rarity that every camera had full-size HDMI.
That's why I went with the GH5.
Yep. And I remember me having the A7 III, when that thing took over the world and everything was like, I think it was a micro HDMI. I don't remember. I remember it just being a pain to have to like bring an adapter to a cable, then the cable would always break and it was a mess. But yeah, a lot of the things that have to do with like commercial or bigger set production or just things outside of YouTube. And arguably, my hot take is like YouTube's kind of becoming the next. Look how many shows are produced in the form of like podcasts just like this. This could have been, we could have put 8 lights up here, had 2 cameras, got a location, and it still would have ended up on YouTube, but the production value has gone up. But in terms of the camera for, I guess, what you would traditionally call the professional realm, it's mostly to do with the I/O in the body, not necessarily what the sensor is. I could have put that sensor in an ENG cinema camera style and everyone would have been happy.
One of the things that's really interesting about the S1 II versus the S1R2 is, I was going to say readout speed, but I can't tell you how profoundly uninteresting the metric readout speed is to me. But that's because, first and foremost, if you guys know me, you know that I'm a street photographer along with Claudia. On the other hand, we did do a rolling shutter test. Hold that thought. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. But we did do the rolling shutter test. I simply took the camera. It was with a 51.8 S, which I have to say, using the 1.8 S primes again, they're good. Yeah. They're great for 4K. They're great for video. They don't focus breathe. Hold that thought, because I want to talk about that too. Anyway, I'm running at 24p. We're in the bus, so we're going at a normal speed through city center. No rolling shutter. None. Zero. Zippo. Nada.
On the S1 II.
On the S1 II.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know what happened, and I think what ends up happening with cameras as they come out is the goalpost keeps getting moved in our expectations. Because if rolling shutter was such an issue, the A7 III, which was one of the most popular full-frame mirrorless cameras, had got off a rolling shutter. And no one said anything.
Just want to amplify that. I annoy Claudia when we watch TV at home. We now are binge watching, we just finished binge watching a BritBox miniseries, Agatha Christie's Towards Zero. And the problem is, we love watching TV together, but every time I see rolling shutter, I see the rolling shutter, and then I go, who cares? But then I stop it, and I say, hey, Claudia, did you see that? A big production, rolling shutter on a whip pan. No one cares. Not only does no one care, no one sees it because they know it's a quick movement to what's the next element of the narrative.
Yep.
And big companies with big budgets don't care.
Unfortunately, it's a thing that we, as I don't even call the camera, the filmmaking community, whatever you want to call it, as regards to YouTube and social media, we always just kind of move on to what the next thing is that we have to say, this has to have it, or the camera's useless. Before, like, what was it, 2018, 19, it was 4K, right? When the camera didn't have full frame 4K 24p, don't use it, it's useless. And then it became 120 frames a second. Then it became 10-bit color. It's just moved its way down the line where now it's sensor readout. Next, it's going to be built-in NDs, I guarantee you. Or it's going to be internal 32-bit audio.
I want internal electronic variable neutral density filters and hybrid body. I know it's difficult.
I have a take for that and how you can do it, because Red's done it. But
you're gonna talk about an adapter.
Yes, absolutely. If you can get an adapter that's mount to mount, electronic contact, Red's done it. It's $3,500.
Yeah, but Canon has done it too. They have a neutral density filter in their adapter from EF lenses, which I
remember those filters not being the best quality in the world.
No.
I think if you had a really solid, I think the word Canon missed out was the glass had to be a little bit better quality, because if it was a good, like, true color, no cast ND filter drop in, your reception, is it, because it's still RF to EF, and I think at the time people wanted to get new RF lenses. You couldn't get the, like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm getting into the R system, I don't want to have to go backwards in buying lens. And to this day, Canon doesn't even support that EF mount anymore.
The other thing that was interesting about EF versus RF is that the EF lenses breathe like monsters because they weren't designed for that. Speaking of focus breathing, let's go to that next, because that's another thing that I could care less about, because we don't make those kinds of films. We did a documentary series on a hazardous liquids pipeline called Mariner East. We just put cameras up in people's living rooms and let them talk. The reality is that when Panasonic designed these 1.8S primes, the focus breathing is really well controlled. But back to this same BritBox series, I've just annoyed Claudia because I stopped it for the roll of shutter. And 5 minutes later, I stopped it again. And I said, see? And I rewind it. And she starts rolling her eyes, legitimately so. But then I look at it, and there's big focus breathing. Now, I admit that bothered me a little bit. But I always thought, for YouTubing, come on. It doesn't matter.
No.
Except if you are, and it used to be that I'd shoot product B-roll completely separately in another part of the studio. Mm-hmm. But during COVID, I started doing live things, and I would show something. I'm not going to cut away to a second camera in another. Yeah. So I just hold it up like this. And that is where focus breathing would bother me, because the background would go like this or like this.
Wobble, wobble.
Yeah. So fascinating enough. And I was having this conversation with Matt, that it may be the focus breathing matters more to YouTubers than it does for narrative productions, for the viewers anyway.
To be fair, there's a lot of aspects of cameras that matter more to people in the YouTube community than they do that watch movies. Rolling shutter is exactly one of those things, right? When you're just talking about that, where, like, what's acceptable rolling shutter? I'm like, well, for who? The guy that's going to pause the movie and say, did you see that? Or the general viewer that's going to pay the money to watch the movie in the theaters, right? And those are the kind of things where I was talking about, the goalpost keeps getting moved, right? I guarantee one of the first things, there's going to be two things that I think people are going to look at the S1 II, and it kind of has to do well for the general zeitgeist of, I guess, the YouTube community to accept. One, it has to be very controlled overheating, almost none.
Right.
Which I would, to be fair, we're in Texas, one of the hottest places right now.
And humid.
It's gross humid. No overheating, though. I haven't experienced it yet.
To be fair, the real torture test, I have the real torture test, where I turn it on. Pennsylvania suburbs in the summer, 90 degrees, 80% humidity, sunny skies. The only cameras that never died on me were the GH5 and the S5 Mark II. Active cooling is a big deal. And it's not just the ambient air temperature, it's the UV. from the sun makes a big difference. So if you're a wedding photographer in the southern part of the United States or, south of the equator, anywhere in the world.
Matt Johnson's just around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that makes a big difference. And to my surprise, there was a scenario where the S1R2 did overheat, but there are ways around that. These guys, though, I agree with you. Yeah. The likelihood of them overheating is lower.
My S1R2, it took so long for me to get mine to overheat, and I had to do the most idiot. It was an accident. I was in Maui. I took the S1R2 to Maui with me a little bit ago after I went to Norway, and I had it in the back of the trunk. I mounted it on the back of a Pelican case, back of the trunk, pointing inwards, because I wanted to get a shot of like mounting inside to see everybody in the car as you're driving. But the window is right behind the camera, right behind all the important stuff. It's like maybe 102 degrees, sunny, no humidity, just dry, raw sun. And I'm shooting an 8.1K, and it took about 20 minutes. And then it overheated, and I'm like, oh, that's what it looks like. Yeah. But outside of that, I'm like, well, to be fair, I live in Canada. So at the time, Canada in February, it wasn't much overheating. And I think that might be a function of like when we say hybrid camera, it truly is a splitting things down the middle. So when you want to take super high resolution, 45-minute takes, that's an ENG cinema camera job, to be honest with you, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah.
Where hybrid means like you're not necessarily taking longer takes. So at high resolution, you're going to generate more heat, and then you're going to have overheating. It's kind of just one of those things. No other camera, it's hard for cameras to not do that.
Right.
But thankfully, because we're now working with a lower resolution sensor, technically,
big difference.
The amount of heat generation might be a little bit less, which might be why you might take a little bit more time before you get the overheating warnings.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about frame rates and codecs and all the rest. So this is interesting because this is the first time I'm ever participating in a vlog recording session. Because again, Rec 709, 8-bit 420, 4K, I'm good. Lower processing demands on the CPU, on a Mac Studio Ultra, which is what I use. A lot less disk space being taken up. But Kofi's doing the grading, so I'm really happy about that.
If the grading doesn't look good, they'll let you know.
But the thing that's also nice is that there are so many frame rates and different aspect ratios that can be combined. I think that Panasonic has done a nice job of actually putting in a filtering soft button so that you can cut through the choices very quickly. But one of the things that was interesting is that I had learned on the S1R2 that when shooting 120 frames per second, the best autofocus came with 1:1 pixel mapping as an aspect ratio. So I'm so proud of myself. I'm going to S1R2, I'm going to do the same thing. And all of a sudden I don't see 4K 120p. I see 3.3. And I didn't understand that. That's because this is only 24 megapixels.
Yep.
This sensor doesn't have that problem. Yep. This sensor can shoot full frame, 4K, 120, actually 96.
Yep.
Okay, ask me if I care.
Yeah, between 96 and 120.
Yeah.
It's slow.
Yeah.
It's slow motion. Yeah. Like, the thing is, it's so funny because I remember when a younger creator version of me, a younger filmmaker of me, loved 120. If you didn't have 120 frames a second in your camera, I wasn't using it. I could care less about 120 frames a second.
Old man.
It was funny because I made a video on like things I outgrew as a filmmaker, and shooting 120 frames a second was like one of the top things of the list. Because when you shoot something 120 frames a second, what you're trying to say is this thing is really, really important, and you got to look at it for longer. That's why I'm slowing it down. There are so many things in movies that are more than enough importantly portrayed in 24. And 48 if I need it. 60 is like a kind of like my limit of like, okay, anything slower, I'm like, I don't want to watch an 8-second clip of someone jumping in the air unless there's a really, really good reason.
That is so interesting because 120 frames per second, more than a couple of seconds, I experience as the filmmaker or the editor is just trying to stretch things out. So I agree with you.
The studio said this movie has to be 2 hours and 30 minutes and you got to figure it out.
Or it's got to be 47 minutes for network TV. Yeah. Stretch it out.
I mean, like, I've seen a James Gunn movie or two, and there's a lot of 120 frames a second shot at like T1. And you're like, why am I watching this whole scene this slow for minutes? I'm ready to leave. It'll be like one action scene that's happening. I think there was one with Dave Bautista. I can't remember what it was called. It was a zombie movie. And it's like shot at like super shallow depth of field, 120 frames a second because reasons.
You make another interesting point, which is this. Claudia and I are of the view that the best cinematography is cinematography that disappears in the telling of the narrative.
Yep.
So that's really the mark of mastery as far as we're concerned. There are occasions, like violating the 180-degree rule, where it's actually in service of the narrative as opposed to a mistake. But for the most part, that's right.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so many other things that go into cinematography too, right? I think, and they don't have to be, it's weird how much we've made these two things oppose each other between talking about camera gear and filmmaking. It was never supposed to be things that oppose each other because you kind of need one to do the other anyway, right? And also just there's parts of conversation that are more interesting to some people than others. And I don't think they should ever be in opposition to each other. But part of cinematography, or large parts of it, is so many other things outside the camera and lighting, set design, costume design, who you pick to act a certain role based on how you've done your lensing and your lighting and all that other stuff. That plays a gigantic role. And that's but the thing is, that's such an entirely different conversation. And I don't know what happened on the internet where somehow we've made the crux of cinematography on cameras. And I'm sure someone's going to go in the comment section being like, yeah, but you talk about gear. I'm like, absolutely I do. Because it's a separate conversation. Right? It's just a thing where a bunch of nerds get to talk about that stuff. And then we also...
Who are you calling a nerd?
All of us.
Yeah.
Every single one of us.
I say very often that yes, it's about the gear, but no, it's not about the gear, it's about the people. Yeah. The people behind the camera, the people in front of the camera, most especially the people in front of the camera when we're shooting on the street, but no less so than we're in a narrative or documentary film.
Also, I would say too, it's a conversation starter, right? Most people, I might not be able to connect with a cinematographer based on the work because I haven't done that work myself. But we could talk about cameras because we probably both use the same ones at some point in our life. And that's usually the connection point that people find common. But yeah, in terms of like filmmaking and cinematography, even photography as well, has a lot more to do with tastes.
What do you mean even photography?
Well, the mediums are different. The mediums are different, right? But it's so much to do more with taste than it is but also taste also has to do with what tools you pick for how you do things, right? So
let's not talk about the gear. Let's talk about for whom this kind of camera, specifically, actually, the S12 is aimed, because you said something really, really interesting that you could only say because you're much closer to that stage of career development than I am. And you were talking about cameras like the FX30 versus the S12. Can you go into that for a little bit?
So this is the thing where I think sometimes the community gets lost on a little bit with camera releases, because I think a lot of people already have gone into this ecosystem or into these videos already owning a system. So they're going into it thinking, I need to be convinced by you why I should get the S12. I think what's getting a little bit omitted is there are new people creating new media every single day, getting their first $3,000 camera, or just coming from their iPhone to say, hey, you know what? I did save a bunch of money. I saved $3-4 grand. I am ready to buy that. It would be cruel for me to say, no, you have the budget. You are ready for that. You're telling me you're ready for that step. You're doing the research. Why don't you go buy the used camera? Because when I was ready to buy the A7 III, I would be insulted if someone said the same thing to me. If someone said, no, don't bother the A7 III. Why don't you go and get yourself a T7i? And I'm like, no, but I did my research.
Well, I can understand that.
To be fair, in that particular example, but in that particular example, yeah, if I had done the research, I'm looking at these things, I'm in the market, I'm ready to, I've done the things that I need to do in terms of the research and self-evaluation. And again, it's not for me to tell you, hey, your work isn't good enough to buy this camera. That's not fair. There's no skill testing question to buy these things. The jump on point for people is just going to be better at the same price point. Because what was $3,200, the FX3 is still $3,800 now, and that came out in 2019.
Well, so that's really interesting because, of course, there's been tremendous inflation.
Yep.
And yet the S12 is $3,200.
$32. It's about $100 difference from the S1R2.
On the one hand, one could look at that and go, for 24 megapixels? That's really expensive. But I really appreciated the perspective that you took with that, because you drew the comparisons of what you get for your money And I found that just really interesting.
And it was funny because I was going to do, because I have a Z6 III as well, and from the sensor level, they're very similar. But if I made each extra feature on the S1R2 cost $50, it makes sense for the price. If you talk about where your tally lights are located, the articulating screen, the multiple different open gate shooting modes you get, the ability to shoot in Cinema 4, all the other stuff.
Active cooling.
Great
IBIS.
If you list out every single one of those things and you put a price to them, and then you said, okay, well, if I remove all these things, you'll get down to the camera that's a bit cheaper. But if you're looking for something that is going to give you at least from a body design part, it's going to go a long way. Right? Short of needing things like SDI and built-in NDs, you can even run timecode on these through Bluetooth. Right? Short of some of those things that you would find on like the ENG cameras or the cinema cameras, you will not be upset with that. I can't see anybody grabbing one of these. And if you have the budget for it, obviously, I don't think anybody on YouTube, and I do want to say this before, nobody on YouTube has made these videos wanting you to be in financial ruin based on my recommendation. No one does. No one's ever operated that way. So the whole thing is, and what's kind of should be a given is, if you have the budget, you're ready for it. I'm making this video assuming that you've not used me as your sole point of whether or not to do this. Hopefully, you'll go so far with something like this, which is really cool.
We have the opportunity to shoot anything that we want.
Yep.
And there was a point in your journey where you went to the Red.
Yes, I did.
And you shoot Black Magic. And on the other hand, from the perspective of value, I'm really surprising myself a little bit to say $3,200 for this camera. It seems really appropriate, especially when you compare it to something like a Red.
I would even go as far as to say, if you're someone who is a working professional or has aspirations and becoming a working professional, the ball is rolling for you. Maybe you have a couple of clients here and there, and you've grown out of the gear that you have. And I find, and I will say this as well, I feel like a lot of our gear purchases, yes, is for end user clients. It should make client work better, but it's mostly for us. Well, let's be real. A lot of these things I could shoot on anything I want, but I want to enjoy the part of shooting. And if that means that I want an S12 or a Blackmagic Ursa 12K or whatever the case is, and I can afford it, and my clients don't mind it or whatever, and I want it, yeah, then that is, personally, knowing what I know now, that's just as viable, because I want to enjoy certain parts, right? Everything doesn't necessarily have to be for the service of clients, especially when it's stuff that you have to pay with your own money. But to that same point, in terms of the price of the camera, I might even go as far as saying it's a little cheap for what it is.
Interesting.
Because if that, and I hope no one gets mad at this, if you had put any other brand's logo on the front of that camera, it would have costed more.
I think that's right.
I think it would have costed more money if you had put, if it was a Fuji camera, I'd think you're lying, because they don't make full frame cameras.
Yeah.
If that was a Nikon, it probably cost more. If it was a Canon, definitely would have costed more. If it was a Sony, it would have costed more. LUMIX is going to be able to give you all of that, and it's usually cheaper than what you would find in the competition.
This is also interesting because LUMIX was very late to the hybrid phase detection autofocus game. And the autofocus in the S1R2 is better than it is in the S5 II and S5 IIX. Although we love the S5 II. We have 3 of them. It's my daily driver for the YouTube channel with the 51.8S.
Yep.
And we use only those cameras for 3 camera shoots, because those are the only cameras that just don't overheat. They just work. It's terrific. The S1 II now has a little younger brother, the S1 IIe.
Yes.
And so we have a camera that I don't think any of us expected to see, which uses actually the S1 II body, which is the same as the S1R2 body. Mm-hmm. And it has so much of the functionality of the S1 II. Both are 24 megapixel sensors, although the S5 II sensor is the one that shows up in the S1 IIe body.
There's a couple things that we're also forgetting here as well, though, that we're omitting. We didn't talk about RE-Log-C and that being an available upgrade for that.
Right.
And it was funny because I think the film crew that I was working with were the first person to get people to get it, because we were shooting with the Alexa Mini LF on a short film, and we had it on the GH7. And it was funny because it was such a hard thing to kind of wrap our heads around, because we were shooting on set, we're looking at I'm operating. Brady Bassett's another creator on here. He was DPing. And we're looking at the monitors. We're seeing all 4 monitors. We see the Arri Alexa. We see the GH7, the first one. And we have 2. So it's 3 cameras. And we're looking at these monitors. And you can see that with the Arri Log C with a conversion light on top of it. And we're looking at it. And I'm like, we could tell the difference. But it's good enough that I feel like I'm going to have to lie to people about seeing what I saw. And the idea for that, and sometimes with smaller sensors, the darker areas, you get a little bit of noise because they're not collecting as much light, or just like the smaller sensors, they have the pluses and minuses. The first thing we said is like, I can't wait till this is available for full frame, because that's where you're going to see, you may see a very large difference here where things are going to start to look really good. I'm not saying it's an Arri Alexa, but the idea that you could shoot in ProRes and use Arri Log, it's a very attractive thing for people that want that image quality. But that's going to be in that S1 IIe as well. A lot of those, it's not just a rehousing of SI2X in a couple ways it is, but a lot of as much of the software stuff that they put in the S1 II and the S1R2 is also in this body that uses the older sensor, where you save a bunch of money to get it as well.
I don't recall if they told us if the S1 IIe has the 5.7 million dot EVF or the older 3.7.
It might. I believe it does.
I think it does.
I think the bodies are all identical.
Yeah.
So I can only assume that the viewfinder dots are going to be the same on these 2 guys. Yeah. But then all of the other things between the USB recording, the Cinema 4K modes, the CinemaScope modes.
The CinemaScope 2.4 to 1.
That's all available on the S1E at a price. And it's a perfect timing for that, because what LUMIX did, and I love what they're doing with that, is they said, okay, we're going to make a camera that's competitive from a feature set wise, but we're also going to try to make it competitively priced. Because we can understand that people have their Sonys in the back, or the people that are watching all of this content from other brands and wondering, well, why would I get that, or whatever the case might be. Fine, we'll make it cheaper and put as good, in some ways better technology in these guys. The first thing that might be responded to when these guys get launched would have been, awesome, that sounds cool. $3,100 is a little bit steep to get all those things. LUMIX already said, hold my beer for a second. I'll give you a $24.99 version. It might use the older sensor. You might not get all the bells and whistles. If you want that, you're going to have to pay the cost to be the boss by about $700 to $800. But I'll give you all the body design. I'll give you the updates. You want the 32-bit float. You want the good viewfinder. You want
Blackmagic RAW.
You want the Blackmagic RAW external to a view assist. You want to have all those things. Take them. I'll just give you an older sensor, and it'll be $24.99, which is competitive for a hybrid camera in that space.
When I was 12 years old, I'd been struggling to learn guitar for a little while, and I bought my first real steel string, not nylon string guitar. And I bought a Gibson J40 acoustic. And my attitude was, I'll grow into it.
Yep.
Right? When I got my first camera, real camera, I went from a Sears Easymatic, which was their version of an Instamatic, to a Canon FTQL with interchangeable lenses. And I said, I'll grow into it. Flip side is, I got a Stratocaster. I never grew into it. But this is the kind of camera that you can stay with as long as it's about the final product.
Yeah, and it was funny because there was 2 things. I'm like, well, one, people still have GH5s and love them. Yeah, love them. There's a community of I didn't realize how many people. Well, we did the GH7 stuff when we were working on the film set. We got to keep it for a little bit longer. We sent it back last year. I didn't realize the community of Micro Four Thirds shooters for video. I did not realize how deep that community was. Until people that are like, nope, I'm going to have my GH6, GH7, GH5, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm saying Micro Four Thirds indefinitely. I'd also like to say, and hopefully this happens, and I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier, or a couple days ago, I kind of, in a weird way, wish that everyone kind of shows their cards in terms of their camera releases by the end of next year. And then for 5 years says nothing. Just says, hey, we're going to release everything we want to release. And what's cool is like Lumix takes their time with releasing cameras, right? Like, well, the S1 Mark 1 came out in 2018, 19.
Yes, it did. 18.
2025 now, so it's been 6 or 7 years. I would love the idea if every brand said, hey, we're going to put our best foot forward by December 25th, 2026. Don't bother us till 2032. Because then what ends up happening is that, one, you get, it's hard to find the tool that you think suits you the best when there's so many tools all the time, every single week?
This reminds me of a quote attributed to Heraclitus. I use it very often, especially in our workshops. And it goes something like this. A man never enters the same river twice, for he is not the same man, and it is not the same river. And so it is with camera gear.
Yeah.
Like you were saying earlier, what you thought you had to have 10 years ago, who cares now?
Yeah.
And of course, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I am the same way. Then again, we've been having fun because we're talking about what we want to talk about, but people are tuning in because they want to learn more about the S12, and maybe you guys will appreciate the broader scope that we're taking with this. But is there anything else that we haven't covered in the S12 that you think we ought to?
Maybe not specifically the camera, the Elmount Alliance. I want to talk about that Elmount Alliance real quick because I still have Sony cameras. Do I use them as often as I used to? Based on some of the client work that I have less of because I'm doing cool things like this? Not as much, but one of the things Sony had going for them was lens ecosystem. The lens ecosystem, autofocus, and their sensor technology because they had, they're the manufacturers of it. And a lot of people, they mimic the same tech and they tune things up a little bit. That gap is closed now, but the only thing that's left unturned is, well, I want to get some of those lenses you get for E-mount on my L-mount lens. I have a Laowa 10mm f2.8, my favorite lens. I call it my annoying brother. It's my annoying little brother lens. Because
I get it.
Because when you like, it's that lens that when you like, you're taking videos of your nieces and nephews, you get on the wide angle and they're like right up in your phone asking if you have games on it. That's the lens for me. But L-mount doesn't have one with autofocus, and I'm sitting here like, that's a perfect focal length to get autofocus on, right? Or it's a perfect focal, like a perfect lens that would be great for the L-mount system. I think even there's like wide angle lenses. I think particularly Laowa is really good. The wide angle stuff, not part of the Elmount Alliance, so you won't get autofocus on them. As people have probably seen, Blazar has made gigantic strides.
Anamorphics
have been making a gigantic stride and making affordable anamorphics that look good. They have autofocus anamorphics now, but for E-mount. Well, the LUMIX cameras have open gate 3x2 and 4x3, which is on this guy. Why can't I can't use this is the one lens that would make that so viable for it, but it's not part of the Elmount Alliance, so now we got to wait for it. Third-party companies like Viltrox.
They are on
that 35 f1.2 is one of my favorite lenses. It's a chonky one, but that thing is great.
135 1.8. Yep. Holy moly.
They put a lot of tech in that lens. Can't get it for L-mount. So the thing that I would love to see from these cameras...
Wait a minute. The 35 1.2 you can't get an L-mount?
Nope. It's C-mount or E-mount. It was E-mount, and I think X-mount.
Huh.
But what I would love to see from LUMIX, they've already put their best foot forward on these cameras, and they're really, really good. Yes, we're on a trip at LUMIX. We have been brought here. Our hotel, our meals are paid for. You didn't need to do that for me to tell you the things that this camera can do. I could have done this in Toronto in my dingy apartment office and told you the same thing I'm telling you now. But the second that lens ecosystem opens up a little bit, or maybe there's even new unique lenses that come out for the system, I think that's where you're going to start to see a lot of people start to adopt. And that's the one. That's the only criticism I could think of, because everything else I'm like whining and nitpicking, and they really don't matter when I complain about them and I say it back to myself.
I absolutely hear you. Claudia is primarily a Sony shooter, and the lenses that one can get for the Sony ecosystem, it's the broadest and deepest lens ecosystem out there, bar none. And back in 2018 at the last photo keynote with the announcement of the Elmount Alliance, I said that was the most important announcement at photo keynote. 7 years later, I will say my analysis was right, my timing was off.
Yeah.
But what's wonderful is the way Sigma has really stepped up to the plate. Their 24-70 DGDN Art Mark II, spectacular, on par optically with the Sony. We have the Sony, it's fantastic. The 7200 2.8 DGDN also. The 500 5.6, extraordinary. And then for what we do on the street, the Apo Summicron SL primes, which are...
One of my buddies had one who shoots Leica. I didn't realize that certain things with glass, where you have your Sigmas or you have like your other third parties, like, oh, this is a good lens. And then you get on some of those and you're like, oh, yeah, I was wrong. I am so wrong about everything that I thought I knew. And it sounds so hyperbolic to say it, but when you try it, you're like, oh shoot, okay. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like going from your autofocus photo native lenses to like good cinema glass, to trying like a Cook lens for the first time. And you're like, that's how they got it to look like. What was I doing behind camera bodies? That's the thing. Lighting and everything else, yes, absolutely, whatever. You know what I mean. But when you put on some like really high quality glass, you're like, oh, that's the thing that you got. I tried the Q343, and so it was like, oh, try the APO 43 millimeter lens on it for a bit, and I'm like, oh, like I don't know what that means because I didn't. And I tried, and I'm like, oh, I get why Leica people almost feel like they have barcodes on their legs, and if they say something bad, it starts to burn a little bit. I get that now because there is a different experience with that. But yeah, to your point, having that in the Elmount Alliance is nice.
With the Apo Summicron SL primes, I think the Elmount Alliance has the reference standard 2.0 primes in the business. However, the gap is narrowing. And for 99% of us, 99% of the time, the 1.8S primes are fabulous.
Yep.
Sigma's I series,
Yes,
they are wonderful and they are a joy in hand. So there are exotic things that Sony in particular is doing with their lenses. We just got our hands on the 50-150 and did a review of that. And it is a prime zoom. That's what it is. It's crazy. But I agree with you. The flip side is as the gap narrows, especially with Viltrox and now TT Artisan.
yes,
That's really something.
they just came out with new cinema lenses, I think, the other day, and I took a look at them, and they look really nice. They're super solid. Okay, they're super solid. And I was like, oh, how much? Like, what are you guys opening the price at? And I think they said like $900 a pop. And I'm like, the me in 2019 trying to buy a cinema lens, and it was like the Sigma Cine Primes. It was like they were like $4,000 a pop, and it's the same glass as
ginormous
and the huge. You got something that's half the price and a fifth of the cost.
Yeah,
and not a fifth of the quality.
Yeah.
But yeah, as that gap turns around, you're starting to see the gaps are closing, which is why I'm like, by next year, everyone put your best foot forward. And then let's talk about the things we do with the cameras and not the cameras.
Well, I predict that much as you would like that, that's not going to happen.
No, it's not.
But that is a nice way to wrap it up for now.
Yes, sir.
Guys, check out Kofi Yeboah. He is really just an extraordinary human being. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, he has a set of skills and expertise and a life experience that I don't, and I appreciate that. That's why I brought him on. But if you hadn't been you, if you weren't the person that you are, I wouldn't have asked you to spend time.
I appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone with Kofi Yeboah. See you next time. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 10 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code HUGH at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comments section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.